They think they know who I am. Before I tell you what happened at that graduation dinner, the night my son looked me in the eye and said what he said, I need you to understand something about me first. My name is Olivia. Olivia Jean Tatum. I am 64 years old. I was born in Richmond, Virginia, raised by a woman who ironed other people's shirts for 30 years and never once complained about it. My mother used to say, Olivia, your hands are your dignity. I believed her. I still do. I worked as a licensed practical nurse for 31 years. Mostly night shifts. Mostly on my feet. I raised my son, my boy Wesley, alone after his father passed from a heart attack when Wesley was 9 years old. There was no life insurance. There was no savings account. There was a small house with a mortgage I could barely make, a refrigerator that needed a new compressor, and a little boy who cried himself to sleep for 3 months straight. I did not cry. I did not have time. I picked up extra shifts. I learned to cut hair at home so I didn't have to spend money at a salon. I packed Wesley's lunch every single day. Not because the school lunch was bad, but because I wanted him to know that someone at home was thinking about him at noon. I drove a 2003 Buick LeSabre until the transmission went out completely, and then I took the bus. I was not ashamed. I was building something. And Wesley, my boy, was smart. Lord, he was smart. His third-grade teacher called me at work one evening and said, Mrs. Tatum, your son is gifted. I had to press the phone against my chest for a second because I didn't want her to hear me cry. I started saving for college when he was in 5th grade. $12 here, $40 there. I opened a separate account at the credit union and I did not touch it. Not when the hot water heater burst in January. Not when my car insurance lapsed for 2 months and I drove scared every single day. Not when my own mother got sick and I had to help with her prescriptions. That account was Wesley's. I told myself that over and over again. That account is Wesley's. By the time he graduated high school, I had $41,000 saved. He got a partial scholarship to Virginia Commonwealth University. I covered the rest. 4 years. Room, board, books, fees. I took out a small personal loan for his senior year when costs went up and my hours got cut. I paid it back myself. He never knew about that loan. I didn't want him worrying. He graduated with a degree in business administration. I sat in that arena in my good navy dress, the one I bought at Marshall's for $34 and wore twice a year. And why twice a year? And I cried the whole time. Not sad tears, the kind that come from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been holding on for a long time. That was 12 years ago. What happened between that day and the night of that dinner is a story I am still learning to put into words. Wesley got a job at a logistics firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Good salary. Benefits. He moved down there about 8 months after graduation, said he wanted to start fresh somewhere new. I understood. I was proud. I visited when I could, drove the 3.5 hours on my days off, always brought something, a pot of my chicken and dumplings, a sweet potato pie, his favorite praline cookies that took me 2 hours to make. He met a woman named Courtney about 2 years into his time in Charlotte. She was from a prominent family. Her father was a real estate developer. Her mother sat on the board of a private school. They had a big house in Myers Park and drove matching Mercedes. Nice people, from what I could see. Nice people, from what I could see. Very polished, very put together. I tried. I genuinely tried. The first time I met Courtney, I brought a hostess gift, a beautiful candle set from TJ Maxx and a handwritten card. She smiled and set it on the counter, and I never saw it again. I told myself that didn't mean anything. People are busy. Life is busy. They got engaged after about a year of dating. Wesley called me on a Tuesday morning. I was just getting home from a night shift, still in my scrubs, and he said, Mama, I asked Courtney to marry me. I sat down right there on my front steps and I said, Baby, that is the most wonderful news. And I meant it. I meant every word. The wedding was beautiful. Myers Park United Methodist Church. Reception at a rooftop venue downtown. Her parents paid for most of it, which was generous. I offered to contribute, and Courtney's mother, very graciously, I thought at the time, said they had it covered. I bought Wesley and Courtney a KitchenAid stand mixer from their registry and a check for $500 because that was what I could do, and I was not going to let pride make me do more than I had. After the wedding, things shifted. It was subtle at first, the kind of subtle you explain away because you love somebody. I would call Wesley on Sunday evenings the way I always had. Sometimes he'd answer, sometimes he wouldn't. I started getting voicemails more than I got him. When I did reach him, the calls were shorter. 5 minutes, maybe 10. I could hear Courtney in the background sometimes, not saying anything in particular, just present, like a clock ticking in a quiet room. I drove to Charlotte for Thanksgiving that first year. I brought my chicken and dumplings and my sweet potato pie and my pralines. I stood in Courtney's mother's kitchen, because they had the dinner at her parents' house. And I watched the other women laugh and arrange things on platters, and I felt like I was visiting a country where I didn't speak the language. No one was unkind. That is the thing that is hardest to explain to people. No one was outright rude. But I was invisible in a way that has weight to it. You know what I mean? Like you could walk right through me and not feel a thing. After dinner, Courtney's father gave a toast. He talked about his daughter, about Wesley, about the family they were building together. He talked about his own father and the values he passed down. It was a lovely toast. My name was not in it. I sat at the end of the table holding my wine glass, and I told myself, it's his family, his house, his toast. This is fine. It was not fine. But I kept telling myself it was. The second year of their marriage, Wesley and Courtney bought a house. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, in a nice neighborhood called Barkley Downs. Wesley called me excited, and I was excited with him. He sent me photos. It was gorgeous. Hardwood floors, big kitchen, a yard with a magnolia tree in the back. About a week after they moved in, Wesley mentioned, casual, almost an aside, that they were a little stretched financially with the down payment and closing costs. I asked him how much they were short. He said about $8,000, just to have a comfortable cushion going forward. I want you to understand something. I had $1,100 to $200 in my savings at that time. That was everything. That was my emergency fund, my cushion, my security. I was 61 years old, and I was 3 years from retirement. I gave him $8,000. I wired it the next day. He said thank you. Courtney texted me a smiley face emoji. I didn't hear from either of them for 6 weeks after that. I told myself, they're busy. New house, new neighborhood. People get overwhelmed. This is normal. Then came the dinner. Wesley called me in March, this past March, and said they were having a small celebration dinner. He had been promoted to regional director at his company. Big deal. Significant raise. I was so proud I could have floated right off the ground. He said they were having a few people over, some of his colleagues, Courtney's parents, a couple of close friends. He wanted me there. I drove the 3.5 hours. I got my hair done the day before, spent $65 at the salon, which I don't do often. I wore my good black dress, the one with the pearl buttons, and my good pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. I brought a bottle of champagne and a card that I spent a long time writing, trying to put into words how proud I was, how far he'd come, how much that 9-year-old boy who cried himself to sleep had grown into something extraordinary. There were about 12 people at dinner, round table in their dining room. White tablecloth, candles, the good dishes. Courtney had cooked, or had things catered. I was never entirely sure, and it was all beautiful. I was seated at the far end of the table, not next to Wesley, not near Courtney's parents, who were at the other end. I was between 2 of Wesley's colleagues, young men in their 30s who were perfectly pleasant but had no particular reason to pay attention to me. I understood the geometry of it. I was not naive. Dinner went fine for a while. Wine was poured. Food was passed. There was laughter and conversation about the company, about travel, about the neighborhood. I smiled and nodded and answered when I was spoken to, and I was genuinely happy to be there, genuinely proud to be in that room with my son, even from the far end of the table. Then one of the colleagues, a young man named Brett, asked Wesley about his background, where he grew up, how he got into the industry. It was a natural, friendly question, the kind people ask at dinner parties. Wesley straightened up a little in his chair. He talked about his degree, his early career, the mentors he'd had at the firm. All of that was true, and I was nodding along, glad to hear him tell it. Then Brett said, "And your family, where are you from originally?" There was a beat, just a half second. But I felt it. Wesley said he grew up in Richmond. Brett asked if his parents were still there. And Wesley, my son, my boy, the child I raised alone on night shift wages and packed lunches and 31 years of hard work. Wesley said, "My dad passed when I was young, And I have someone, he gestured vaguely in my direction, who helped out when I was growing up. Someone who helped out. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Because I had to sit with it for the rest of that dinner. Someone who helped out. Not my mother. Not, this is my mom. She raised me by herself. Not anything that would have told those 12 people at that table who I actually was to him. Someone who helped out. I did not cry. I did not make a scene. I set down my fork very carefully, and I picked up my wineglass, and I looked at my son from the far end of that white tablecloth, and I thought, I see you. I see exactly who you are right now. And I see exactly who you are right now. And I see exactly who I need to be. Courtney did not correct him. Her parents did not react. Brett smiled politely and moved on. The dinner continued as if nothing had happened, because for everyone else at that table, nothing had. After dessert, I excused myself to the restroom, and I stood at that sink for about 4 minutes. I looked at myself in the mirror, my good black dress, my mother's pearl earrings, and I made a decision. Not an angry decision. A clear one. I came back to the table. I said my goodbyes warmly. I hugged Wesley. I told him I was proud of him, and I meant it. Because I will always be proud of what he accomplished. I thanked Courtney for a lovely dinner. I drove 3.5 hours back to Richmond in the dark, and I did not turn the radio on, because I needed to think. I thought the whole way home. Now here is the part of the story where I need to back up, because what happened next only makes sense if you understand something I have never told Wesley. When I gave him that $8,000, I did not wire it as a gift. I wired it as a loan, and I had the paperwork to prove it. My mother always said, Olivia, put it in writing. She said that about everything. Landlords, contractors, even friends. Put it in writing. When Wesley first mentioned the money, something in me, some quiet, practical part of me that my mother raised, said, write it down. So I drafted a simple loan agreement. I used a template from LegalZoom, had it notarized, kept a copy in my files. I had emailed it to Wesley, and he had signed it digitally and sent it back without, I suspect, reading it very carefully. He probably thought it was just a formality, just his mama being cautious. It was not a formality. The agreement stated that if the loan was not repaid within 3 years, I had the right to place a lien on any real property co-owned by him, that I could demonstrate was purchased with the assistance of said funds. I know, you're wondering how a nurse from Richmond knew to write something like that. I'll tell you, I had a friend, a woman named Adelaide, who'd been a paralegal for 20 years. We had lunch every few weeks. I told her what I was doing, and she helped me word it right. Adelaide always said, Olivia, love is love, but paper is paper. The Monday after that dinner, I called Adelaide. I did not call Wesley. I did not send an angry text or write a long letter. I did not post anything anywhere or call any of my relatives to talk about what happened. I simply called Adelaide, told her what had been said at that dinner, and asked her what my options were. Adelaide said, Olivia, that agreement is valid. He hasn't repaid a cent in 2 years. You have options. I took my time, 3 months actually. I am not a reckless person. I prayed about it. I talked to my pastor, a quiet man named Reverend Okafor, who had known me for 15 years. I went to my therapist. Yes, I have a therapist. I have had one for 6 years. And if more women my age did the same, this world would be a very different place. I thought about what I wanted, not what I was owed, what I actually wanted. What I wanted was not revenge. I want to be clear about that. I did not lie awake at night dreaming about my son's downfall. I lay awake thinking about that little boy who cried himself to sleep, and about the woman who held it together for him, and about how somewhere between that boy and this man, something had been lost, or maybe discarded. And I thought, if I do nothing, I am telling him that it is acceptable, that I can be reduced to someone who helped out, and I will show up again next holiday with my pralines, and my good dress and my dignity neatly folded away in my purse. I would not do that. In June, 3 months after the dinner, Adelaide helped me file the lien paperwork on the Barclay Downs property. It was legal. It was clean. It was exactly what the agreement allowed. Wesley called me on a Thursday morning. I was on my porch drinking coffee when the phone rang. I looked at his name on the screen and I felt not satisfaction, not triumph. Something quieter. Like when you finally close a window that has been letting in cold air for years. I answered. He was not calm. He said he had heard from his mortgage servicer. He said there was a lien on the house. He said, "What is going on?" He said, "Mama, what is this?" I said, "Wesley, honey, do you remember the loan agreement you signed 2 years ago?" Silence. "You never repaid it. I waited. I gave you time. And then I came to your dinner, and I sat at the end of your table, and I was introduced as someone who helped out." I kept my voice very even. "I am your mother. I am the only parent you have ever had. I raised you alone. I worked night shifts for 31 years. I gave you every advantage I was capable of giving, and that is how you introduced me." More silence. Then, "Mama, I didn't mean." I said, "I know, baby. I know you didn't mean it the way it came out. But it came out. And it came out that way because that is somewhere near what you actually feel, and I have been pretending not to see it for a long time." He started to explain. He talked about the dinner, about Brett, about not wanting to make things complicated, about Courtney's family and the way they see the world and how he has to navigate. I listened. I let him finish. And then I said, "Wesley, I love you. I will always love you. But I will not continue to show up somewhere I have been told, in one way or another, to disappear. The lien stays until the loan is repaid. That is the agreement you signed." He asked about the house. I told him the lien did not mean he had to sell. It meant that if they ever refinanced or sold, I would be repaid first. That was all. It was not designed to destroy him. It was designed to be seen. He hung up. Courtney called me 20 minutes later. I did not answer. Her mother called me 2 days later. I answered that one, because I am a grown woman, and I am not afraid of difficult conversations. She was polished and careful in the way that people are when they are furious, but were raised not to show it. She said she thought this was a family matter that should be handled privately. I said I agreed completely, which was why I'd handled it privately, through legal channels, without involving anyone else. She did not have a response for that. I did not go to Charlotte for the 4th of July. First time in years, I had not made that drive for a holiday. I went instead to see my college roommate, a woman named Cynthia, who lives in Asheville now and has a little cabin near the river. We sat on her porch for 3 days and drank sweet tea and talked about everything and nothing, and I slept better than I had in years. Wesley reached out in August. Not a phone call. A letter, actually. Handwritten, 3 pages. He talked about growing up, about things he remembered, the pralines, the packed lunches, the Buick LeSabre, a fishing trip we took once when he was 11. He said he was sorry. Not in the big, sweeping way people sometimes say sorry when they want something. In a small, specific way. He said, "I introduced you as someone who helped out, and that was wrong. You didn't help out, you held everything together. I knew even as I said it that it was wrong, and I said it anyway, and I don't have a good reason for that. I read that letter 4 times. Then I folded it and put it in the box where I keep important things. My mother's obituary, Wesley's 3rd grade report card, the card he made me for Mother's Day when he was 7 that says, 'You're the best mom in the world,' with a drawing of the 2 of us holding hands in front of our house in Richmond. I have not called him yet. I am not ready. I am not punishing him. I am giving myself the time I should have given myself years ago. The time to be clear about what I need, what I deserve, and what I am willing to accept going forward. For the first time in maybe 30 years, I am putting Olivia first. Just for a little while. The lien is still on the property. He has not repaid the loan. When he does, if he does, I will put that money in a savings account. Maybe I'll finally take the trip to Portugal I have been talking about since 2019. Maybe I'll get my porch repaired. Maybe I'll just let it sit there, quiet and solid, like proof of something. I live in a small apartment now in the Fan District of Richmond. 2 bedrooms, good light in the morning, a magnolia tree outside my kitchen window, which I find either ironic or appropriate. I haven't decided which. I have my coffee on the porch every morning. I have Adelaide and Cynthia and Reverend Okafor and my Thursday evening Bible study group. I have my therapist on the 2nd Tuesday of every month. I have the knowledge, which I hold close, that I did not come this far and work this hard to be erased from my own son's story. I am not someone who helped out. I am Olivia Jean Tatum. I am the whole reason there is a story to tell. I keep thinking about that moment at the sink, my mother's pearl earrings in the mirror, the sound of dinner conversation drifting down the hall like it belonged to someone else's life. People ask me sometimes, when I tell pieces of this story to friends, to Cynthia on her porch, to my Thursday Bible study group, they ask, wasn't it hard to walk away? And I always have to pause because they're asking the wrong question. The hard part wasn't walking away. The hard part was all those years I stayed. All those Sundays I drove 3.5 hours with my pralines and my good dress and my heart wide open, pretending not to notice the way a room could make you feel like a shadow. That was the hard part. Leaving was the first easy thing I'd done in years. What I've come to understand, not from a book, not from anyone telling me, is that the way we treat people is never really hidden. Wesley didn't decide in that moment to call me someone who helped out. That decision had been building for years, in small rooms, in quiet choices, in the way he learned to navigate between two worlds and decided which one I belonged in. Actions have a way of catching up, not because the universe is keeping score in some mystical ledger, but because the truths of who we are keep showing up in what we do. He introduced me the way he had come to see me, and that was the most honest thing that happened all night. Adelaide always said, paper is paper. My mother always said, put it in writing. Two women, decades apart, teaching me the same thing, that love without wisdom is just sentiment, and sentiment doesn't hold up in a crisis. I think about all the mothers I know who give and give and give money, time, their best years, their retirement cushion, and never once write anything down because they believe that love is enough of a guarantee. It isn't, not because people are cruel, but because life is complicated and memory is convenient, and people remember what serves them. The most loving thing I ever did for Wesley might have been that notarized agreement. It was the one thing in our relationship that could not be rewritten later. And I think about what it cost me to become the woman who knew to do that. 31 years of night shifts, a 2003 Buick I drove until it died, holidays I spent tired, dreams I quietly folded up and set aside. That is not something I regret. I would do it again, every bit of it. But I will tell you this. I did not survive all of that just to disappear at someone's dinner table. I did not build a life out of nothing, with nothing, for no one to acknowledge. The resilience it took to raise a child alone does not expire when that child grows up. It belongs to me. It will always belong to me. There is something that happens when a woman finally decides she is done shrinking. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is very quiet, actually, like that 4 minutes at the sink. Like the drive home in the dark without the radio on. Like filing paperwork on a Tuesday and going to bed and sleeping well. I am Olivia Jean Tatum. I have been good. I have been smart enough to protect myself even when I was being good, and I have had the backbone to follow through when the moment came. Those three things together, the character, the clarity, the follow-through, are what I want to leave behind. Not the Lien, not the story. That, Wesley's letter is in the box with his third-grade report card. I have not decided what comes next. But for the first time in a long time, that decision belongs entirely to me.